Tavis, I was as shocked as you were to hear of PBS's sudden announcement regarding my television program. Let me say at the outset that I have the utmost respect for all women, and I certainly celebrate the courage of those women who've come forth of late to share their own truth. But let me also assure you that I have never groped, inappropriately exposed myself, or coerced any colleague in the workplace ever in my 30-year career. PBS launched this so-called investigation of me without ever even telling me about it. I only learned of this investigation because former colleagues, former staffers, started to call me to tell me they were getting a phone call from some PBS investigator asking, number one, did Tavis ever make you feel uncomfortable in the workplace? And number two, can you give us other persons to call? Only after threatening a lawsuit did PBS investigators agree to sit down and talk to me for 3 hours. And even then, their minds must have been made up, because almost immediately after that session ended, this story broke in Variety. PBS investigators refused to look at any of my documentation, refused to talk to any of my current staffers, refused to give me the names of any of my accusers, and refused to give me any semblance of due process. It is clear that this has gone too far, and I, for one, intend to fight back. PBS overreacted, and they launched a sloppy investigation. It's time for a real conversation in this country about where the lines are, about how men and women can engage each other in the workplace. And I look forward to actively participating in that conversation.
From WBRN Radio in Boston on the Boston Red Network, the title of our episode today, on the 14th of December 2017, Tavis Smiley in the bullseye of McCarthyism. We'll see if we can shorten that down, but basically we want you to understand that Tavis Smiley is the latest victim. Now, Tavis Smiley is not someone that we put on the top of our list, no doubt about that. Tavis Smiley and his conduct towards the former President Barack Obama was shameful. And his state of quote-unquote what he called Black America, he's had some problems. But Tavis Smiley, no doubt the only African-American at the public television operation, has been victimized. And we'll get into that past his statement and what has happened there. The article from Variety, and there was also one from The Observer there. And we'll start this off with from the Washington Post. The statement, and we'll have the statement we'll get to in a minute here. PBS engaged in an outside law firm to conduct an investigation immediately after learning of the troubled allegations. The investigation included interviews with witnesses as well as with Mr. Smiley. The inquiries uncovered. Now, he said he did not talk with these lawyers at all. Credible allegations of conduct that is inconsistent with the values and standards of PBS. The totality of this information led to the decision. It was first reported by Variety on Wednesday afternoon. The Tavis Smiley show is produced by an independent production company, TS Media, while PBS has been airing the series since 2004. It does not employ Tavis Smiley or his staff. Now, he did respond on Facebook, so this is from the Washington Post. Some witnesses expressed concern that their employment status was linked to the status of a sexual relationship with Mr. Smiley. Variety reported it's a 30-minute talk show, and was in the process of teaming up with J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot to develop a television adaptation of Smiley's book Before You Judge Me, The Triumph and the Tragedy of Michael Jackson's Last Days for Warner Brothers Television. I guess it won't appear now. And they mention other people here. Charlie Rose. Now, Charlie Rose is a different situation. He, as far as I know, did not fight back. He took the allegations, apologized, and rode into the sunset, so to speak, if we get a metaphor of Roy Moore. Now, Garrison Keillor with the public radio that he had been on in Minnesota is fighting back. He's hired criminal defense lawyers, and that is out there. Many of these allegations are older allegations. Let's get the let's go to Variety. And this, he says, it's exclusive here on the 13th of December. Has been suspended. Effective today, PBS has indefinitely suspended distribution of Tavis Smiley's production. An independent production company, the public broadcaster, said they had engaged. We won't go there. Sources close to the production told Variety that PBS hired an attorney, Susan Taylor Wirtz, I guess, Wirtz, of the firm MSK to oversee the investigation into Mr. Smiley's behavior. She declined to comment to Variety. According to sources, MSK took reports from 10 witnesses, a mixture of men and women of different races and employment levels in Smiley's organization. Most of them are former staffers. Now, Mr. Smiley said they did not talk to any of his staffers. The investigation found credible allegations that Smiley had engaged in sexual relationships with multiple subordinates. The source said some witnesses interviewed expressed concern that their employment status was linked to the status of a sexual relationship with Mr. Smiley. In general, witnesses described, and this is dicey here, as creating a verbally abusive and threatening environment that went beyond what could be expected in a typical high-pressure work environment. Several expressed concern about retaliation. And they just go on to say he's host of the show. It's filmed in Los Angeles. Mr. Smiley has an office in South Central Los Angeles. He was formerly worked for the great Mayor Tom Bradley. And he's sponsored by Walmart, has received 4 NAACP Image Awards. The public radio program, the Tavis Smiley Show, distributed by Public Radio International. That was 2005 to 2013. Originally came to prominence during the mid-90s. A February piece in the Observer, Jackie Hazagi, Hazagi, a former producer on the TV show, wrote that Smiley's misogyny, is always creeping around, barely camouflaged by Midwestern good manners. Hazagi described him as picking up a woman at the Orlando airport and bringing her along on a reported trip. And I won't get into this. That he had a romantic relationship with another producer and quoted him as degrading PBS executives. Evidently, he did not like the executives at PBS. Now, this is from there. The Observer goes into more details. We won't put most of the trash out there. You can get it elsewhere. But this was the Observer. This has been out here since February. And I don't know when they started I looked back in the car and I could see Veronica, a young woman that Travis had picked up at the Orlando airport and brought along as a buddy. Looking at her, she is so stupid. He tells me during a stopover from New York to Bismarck at a Chick-fil-A. What the hell is he doing eating there? In the Minneapolis airport Delta terminal, after Veronica had left us at the counter and walked towards the gate. I am going to carry all this food in my bags now. I specifically told her to wait for us. She tells me angrily, Travis, misogyny is always creeping up. I guess that's where the quote came from. Buys flowers, carries luggage until their girlfriends end up scrambling for some 800 line. You have to call Johnson or Booker T. Washington your timepiece. I tell him after reading his first draft, writes that we need more W.B. Du Bois's and less Booker T's, no doubt about that. That is correct. As a senior producer on the Tavis Smiley show, I wasn't exactly sure how I would now rewrite his op-ed, for USA Today and Time magazine with my name nowhere to be seen on the byline, a direct violation of every WGA rule that his op-ed editor, Claire Howarth at Time and Jill Lawrence at USA Today surely would be very surprised to discover. Now, the orthological rule. Anyway, I was in London last year when the Leave Camp won, and and I emailed Tavis about what I observed. Although big cities like London had elected a Muslim mayor, and Mr. Khan overwhelmingly voted for Remain. The Brexit happened in England because of provincial blue-collar votes for people who had voted for Labour all their lives. I told him Brexit was a dress rehearsal for what was about to happen here on November the 8th, a long list of shocking propagandas. DJ Trump and Boris Johnson, Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, and a disintegrating Clinton, Cameron, and more shocking than basic was to see Tavis next week on Face the Nation repeating to John Dickerson word for word what I told him. If anyone back in L.A. mentioned the name of Veronica, Tavis tells me as soon as we are alone in the rental SUV once we arrived at Camp Ochita. Just tell them she was your girlfriend. You brought her along. Don't tell them anything about her to Kim in particular. The question of my relationship status, and if saying something was with Veronica put me in a very different situation with people at the show who knew about my private life never crossed his mind. Kim in question would be Kimberly Logan, the supervising producer on the show. According to word around town, Tavis allegedly occasionally loved interest. Supervising a producer is a made-up title, Tavis being all-controlling EP executive producer, but in this case, Kim runs that show like a mother, a Camelot mother, a superior, a Walmart micromanager, fermenting idiot secrecy out of the most asinine decisions. Oh, good God. Anyway, Walmart is sponsoring the liberal show. Well, no doubt about it. I hate people who run public radio. This is from the Observer. Bep Hopi, Marilyn, Mary Nelson, Margaret Ibrahim, I guess. Tavis was told me every single one of them, and they hate me too. I don't take their calls. I don't return their emails. I'm the only African guy on PBS, and all these white people are waiting to see me tumble. Well, I guess they finally have. The show is very fragile, like an egg. Don't drop it. And this is a very long article. I will not read all of it, but it sort of rambles on and on here. From Ed Snowden on, they talk about just about anything you can think about. Tavis Smiley show is a Benchmark prior to joining that is a producer, Kim, who was with Cedric the Entertainer. Oh, well. some other character here in this, and I don't know who he is. The very, very long article. I invited philosopher Peter Singer to the show, hoping that he would be able to talk about ethics, but doing only 12 minutes of that. To my horror, Kim gave him the topic discussed was the most obvious one. Who is this guy, Singer, to tell us what's right? The great Frederick Reisman was treated with the same contempt. Oh, well. One of the only political commentators who made sense for me around election time, other than Chris Hedges, who I have been on the show, was the Russian specialist and media blacklist Stephen Cohen. He was alarmed that Obama and Clinton's rhetoric on Russia had upped DECOM annex all over the world. DECOM. Anyway, I didn't know he was blacklisted. Stephen Cohen used to be everywhere, and I'm hoping we are talking about a different person. I remember him used to be a regular at CBS News, and I have to look him up. But anyway, we'll get back to Stephen Cohen. 2 years ago, when she finally got to the top job, Kim was able to give herself the only perk that interests her, booking celebrities and attending private screenings. Oh boy. So this is basically an assassination job here. You can kind of tell that it rambles on and on and on and on. And I'm convinced that as I pressed on, Jimmy's spiritual life coach from Woodstock also made the trip to Alabama. Demeen. I'm not sure who the hell Demeen is. Anyway, this is This was in September. This is Jackie Hazagi. Now, I'm not I guess she writes for The Observer, evidently so. Oliver Stone, the Putin interview. Jock Hazagi. I'm sorry I said she. Jocks. Okay. Anyway. Why I said Jacqueline? Who knows? So this bird is a freelance writer who also appears in The Guardian. Lives in New York. Jock Hazagi. From The Observer, and I believe this is Trump's son-in-law's newspaper, if I'm not correct here. Sophisticated readers, yeah, okay. Observer Media. Anyway, that's so much for The Observer, and we didn't get anything there. I'm not sure why we didn't get anything on Steve Cohen. Anyway, I believe it is the same Steve Cohen. So where does this go from here? Well, okay. This is a piece by Jock Hazagi, a former producer. Oh, okay. He a former producer on the Smiley's TV show, wrote that Smiley's misogyny is always creepy. Anyway, this not sure of where all of this is going, but with a fight back, a credible fight back, we'll know more. So I'm assuming Tavis will go out and hire defense attorneys also, and they will, of course, come with what is needed. I notice it's going around here. When I say around the web, with him. And of course, PBS, public television, has long been attacked as quote unquote elitist, and it's anti-African American, no doubt about that. What happened to PBS? And the machinations go in and out, but they had people like who was it? The conservative, what's his name? Carlson. I think his name's Carlson. Anyway, he was there at one time. They tried to appeal more to the right before Barack Obama appeared in the presidency, but it's always been in National Public Radio. There was Dan O'Shore was there at one time, and I was thinking a lady that hosted the Sunday show. I don't listen to them anymore, but they totally changed with the time and became more of a, I guess you'd say, a groupie situation that mimics the audience in which they are trying to reach. Now, public TV now is a little bit different. The old McNeil-Lehrer report is not there, and of course, our own Gwen Ifill, late Gwen Ifill, is dead. Judy Woodruff, I guess, is holding down the desk. Not certain whom else is there, but all of that atmosphere has changed, and the parallel between these two investigations with the public radio and now PBS. Now, PBS and Charlie Rose, obviously a different situation. Rose did not fight back. And, of course, Tavis Smiley being a totally different situation also. That he is not an employee of the public TV at all. He comes from an independent production company, and they have just stopped distributing his. The same thing happened to Garrison Keillor. They stopped distributing his shows, tried to write him out of history. That thing is going into is in a legal format now, and I would predict as they get more into a legal format that some of these allegations will stand, some will fall apart. If you recall, when we were covering Judge Moore, there was a lady named Nelson that doctored the yearbook. Her credibility immediately fell, and Judge Moore wrote on. Now, basically what gave the election to Judge Moore, two things. The followers of O.J. Simpson appeared in great numbers, but they were very, very careful how they framed the campaign. They didn't want to alienate what few European voters they could get because they needed them to get across the finish line. But what also happened in there was Senator Selby helped them out in that he pushed the right in. So Mr. Jones, otherwise known as Whippy Jones, won by 20,000 plus votes. The write-ins were roughly 22,000. So those were votes you never know precisely where they will go, but most of those votes would have went to Roy Moore, or the people would have stayed home. So it's kind of difficult to predict that, but there was a very large turnout. African Americans were about 30% of the turnout behind a dignity movement, no doubt about it. African American women were out there, and what that basically shows is if you have an election that means something, people will turn out if there's something there. Now, obviously, Jones being from Alabama and being within the circumference that he's in, don't expect him to be a Senator Elizabeth Warren, but do expect him to stick to core principles there and probably stay most of the time unified with the Democratic Party, because now he has to start working on re-election. That's the situation. And the senator from West Virginia mentioned, talked about that, how a so-called moderate Democrat, we just call them boll weevils, can maintain their electability in these very right-wing states until something is done. West Virginia, a state that rejection of Barack Obama was based upon a pure racism. Now, in some states, you have problems. For instance, in Michigan, and the sabotage and lynching of John Connor Jr. will not be very palatable for African Americans in the city of Detroit. So you're going to see some machinations going on there. And, of course, Gateway Snyder, who is leaving, take full advantage of that. They first moved with all those militias in Michigan, and then they were able to coalesce not only around that with the NRA, but also around abortion rights with the Catholic constituencies there and the rural constituencies. Thus, the Republican Party on the Gateway Snyder took the governor's chair, put in more voter suppression, and at the same time, here came Flint, a disgrace, and that regime and taking over the legislature, turning the state into a right-to-work state. There are fightbacks, but as you can see, my good friend Paula Laxall was talking about, in places like Texas, hasn't turned blue yet, but even the monster was able to get 9%. There was a 9 percentage points difference between her and DJ Trump. So you are starting to see some of these states, Arizona in particular, and our thoughts go to Senator John McCain, who is in a Walter Reed Hospital fighting with brain cancer. A very sad situation there. But Arizona and Nevada, now those states are starting to open up and move in a different direction along with Virginia. People have had enough of this type of right-wing administration under DJ Trump, Mr. Bannon and company, and even Orpha Rosa, or whatever her name is a token African, was literally thrown out of the White House according to stories looking at it there. He put it up on Facebook. The Secret Service said no, they just deactivated her credentials. She's supposed to be leaving on the 20th of January, but she got into a shouting match with the right-wing Kelly, the chief of staff, cursed him out, and was heading towards the residency to confront DJ Trump. But she activated some switch, and that was the end of that story right there. And supposedly they literally put her, clean this up a little bit, out of the White House. So Thomasina is gone, and I guess that's pretty much the White House staff there. They're all out the door. She was incidentally with him in Mississippi at the so-called African American Museum down there. Let me just very quickly here look at the time, and we'll do the sports before I actually literally forget. We have a numbers man presentation up. Incidentally, we covered the last press conference of Dr. Janet Yellen, that is leaving the Fed. She was not reappointed by DJ Trump, so she is moving, but out of the Fed, but she's sticking around Washington because her husband is a professor at, I believe it's Georgetown. So thus she'll be there, and they still have a house, of course, in Berkeley. Probably can't help to get back there, but nonetheless, it is her last conference, and the Fed basically raised the interest rates 25 basis points, and 1.25, 1.5, very low interest rates historically. She touched on a Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency that does not at this time figure in, but again, the mercantile exchange, various exchanges will be offering various renditions of Bitcoin out there, are cryptocurrencies. So we'll see that in, and it'll be in more or less, we see it as in a shadow banking. Here we go. The Thunder was at the Pacers, Indiana. Thunder 100-95. The Clippers were at the Magic in Orlando. Clippers at 106-95. The Grizzlies were at the Wizards in D.C. Wizards 93-87. The Nuggets were in Boston. Celtics 124-118. The Trailblazers were at the Heat in Florida. Trailblazers 102-95. The Jazz were in Chicago. Bulls 103-100. The Bucks were in the Big Easy. The Pelicans 115-108. The Raptors were in Phoenix, Raptors 115 to 109. And finally, the Hornets were in Houston, the Rockets 108 to 95. Excuse me. We'll see you on a Friday job, or tomorrow is a day that we have some medical tests, so I'm not certain how we're going to do that, but we do have to have those tests performed, and we'll see how they come out. The stresses of life, as one would say. On the 14th of December 2017, Tavis Smiley in the Bulleye of McCarthyism. We'll work with this title.